Ashton Jeanty is widely considered the top running back in the NFL draft. But could he actually fall into the late teens? We'll discuss on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso. With the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome into the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, the Data Queen, Michelle Majuk. On today's episode, we're going to talk about which team in the NFL can go from first all the way to worst in their division this season. The opposite, which team that was worst could go to first. And of course, we're going to start with a conversation about Ashton Jeanty. Before we dive into it, though, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day, and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Michelle, I don't think it's a hot take. I have Ashton Jeanty as the top running back in this draft class, and I think it's probably likely that he would go in the top 10. I would guess you agree with me on that, right?
Yeah, I cannot see him falling out of the top 10 with the Raiders in there, with the Bears at 10. I think that would be a great landing spot. And then at the very farthest, I can see him falling is number 12 to Dallas.
Okay, and listen, I agree with you. That seems fair. But one thing I will say is, and I've been dropping little nuggets. The people who are listening, my everydayers out there, I've been dropping little nuggets. And I think we've talked about this a little bit. I am not convinced that Ashton Jeanty is as good of a player as maybe some people are billing him to be. And Michelle, I know that you do not agree, but I will say, if I have one, I have one. And my guy, Keith Sanchez, I think he's preaching wisdom in his recent mock draft on Locked On NFL Draft.
Now, do I think Ashton Jeanty is like a top 10 elite level? Because you're talking about drafting those guys, that should, like you say, your Saquon Barkley's, your Bijan Robinsons, your Jahmyr Gibbs, your Todd Gurley's, right? I don't know if he checks all the boxes for me to put him there yet, but he's in the box of really doggone good, and I like him, right? And I think he goes to the Cincinnati Bengals, and you're talking about balance, right? That is the balance. Like, because I dare you to put 8 in the box to try to stop Ashton Jeanty with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins on the outside. That will be a problem for you, right? But then, that gives them the opportunity if the Cincinnati Bengals want to go 11 personnel or 10 personnel, right? They just have one running back and go full wide. Guess what? That spreads the box even thinner, right? Now you might have only 5 or 6 in the box, and then Ashton Jeanty gets those holes, and he can run that inside zone, outside zone, be able to jump cut. And if you put him in more situations in space where it's him one-on-one with a defender, then you like that opportunity of him beating the linebacker, right? So that's why it was my, I guess, favorite pick, because I think this one rounds the Bengals out, but it's probably the best situation for Ashton Jeanty also.
All right, Michelle, out of 3 things, what's the most preposterous to you? That Jeanty isn't as good as those guys that he named, that Jeanty will fall to 17 in the draft, or that the Bengals should pick him?
I mean, if he's there at 17, the Bengals would be sprinting for their lives up to that podium. The craziest thing is by far making it to 17. That's just not going to happen. And I do think he's worth the top 10 pick. He averaged 185.8 rushing yards per game this past year. That was not only just the most in the FBS, it was the most in the FBS by nearly 50 rushing yards per game. Nearly 50 rushing yards per game. It was the second most in a single season in the FBS since at least 2000. That's as far back as my data goes. And it was behind only LaDainian Tomlinson, who averaged 189.7 rushing yards per game in the 2000 season at TCU. And then he was drafted 5th overall by San Diego in that next draft falling. And we know what Tomlinson's career was in the NFL. You compare his numbers to Bijan Robinson and Saquon Barkley, the last 2 running backs taken in the top 10, And he beats them all there too in touchdowns and yards per touch and scrimmage yards. Yeah, he played in an easier conference than those guys, but I don't really care. Ashton Jeanty's special, and I'm excited for him, and he's going top 10.
Okay. All right. I hear you on that. Then I will ask you this. See, I don't necessarily agree with some of the things that I'm hearing right there. Like, I think the Bengals would be insane to take a running back when you just paid 2 wide receivers and a quarterback the money that they did and the way that they play offense. Like, the Bengals are going to be the Bengals, and at their core, they're just not going to care enough about running the football to justify taking a running back first round. So I do disagree with that one. However, I will say you start hitting on my heart there when you bring up LaDainian Tomlinson, my favorite running back of all time, period, even as a Titans fan. LaDainian Tomlinson is my guy, no doubt. So I get it. He was historically productive, generationally productive, and I think he's going to be good. If you could pick any team in that top 10 range for Ashton Jeanty is the perfect fit to become the player that everybody, including you, think that he is going to be at the NFL level, that I'm a little skeptical of. What's the perfect landing spot for Ashton Jeanty?
It's absolutely the Bears, because as we just heard from the NFL or NFL draft or whatever that we were just listening to, that he was talking about, imagine with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, how the space Ashton Jeanty will have to work. That's similar in Chicago, right? With DJ Moore, with Rome Odunze, who I expect to take the next step in his second year.
I agree too. I like Rome Odunze.
And then you have Ben Johnson there, who we know what he did with the Lions backfield. They just bolstered up their interior offensive line. I would absolutely love him to land with the Bears again, but it's still going to be hard because he has to make it to them, and maybe they move up. I do think the Raiders are going to have extreme interest in Ashton Jeanty with Pete Carroll there now. We know how much he loves running backs, but I do think for his top ceiling success, that would be with the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, listen, I can't help it but play the skeptic here. I'm a bit skeptical of the Raiders fit as well. They have so many needs on that team that going with a running back there, I guess it just depends on how great you think that Jeanty is going to be. And that's where my skepticism in the entire conversation comes from. But I do agree with you that what the Bears have done in the way that Ben Johnson could use a guy like Ashton Jeanty, and then the weapons that are already there on that offense, it would be a totally different situation than what's going on in Vegas right now. I know Brock Purdy is a good player, but outside of that, what are you really banking on there everywhere else? So I agree with you that the Bears would be the best possible fit for making me wrong about how good. I think he's going to be a good player. I do. It's funny that in that episode, my guy Keith Sanchez compared him to Doug Martin from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers from however long ago that was, making me feel old. And I think people will hear that and be like, Doug Martin, Ashton Jeanty will be better than that. But that's kind of what I'm thinking, like a Doug Martin, like a Maurice Jones-Drew type player. I think that's what I'm looking for there.
That seems like helmet scouting, right? Because Doug Martin also went to Boise State.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Okay.
Yeah, Doug Martin is actually the only running back from Boise State that's ever gone in the first round. So I feel like that's very much helmet scouting. Also, Jeanty averaged pretty much double the rushing yards per game that Doug Martin did in college, almost double the scrimmage yards per game, scored 9 more touchdowns and 10 fewer games played. So a little bit different. And Doug Martin in his rookie year went off for 2,000 yards basically and 12 touchdowns.
That's my point though. Doug Martin's a really good player. That's what I'm saying. See, we are hating on Doug Martin right now. Also, I'm comparing what I think Jeanty will be at the NFL level, not what they were as prospects, I guess,
helmet
in college.
Scouting.
Listen. I didn't even think about it. I promise. Scout's honor. But regardless, we agree that the Bears would be the best landing spot. And speaking of the Bears, every year there's a team that goes from worst in their division to first in their division, and I'm putting my money in the Windy City. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like the energy of a live game, whether it's catching a last-minute MLB showdown or soaking in the excitement of an NBA matchup, especially if it's Luka and the Lakers. But finding great seats at a great price, it used to be a challenge until I found Gametime. I buy all my tickets on Gametime. I'm serious. Football, basketball, baseball, comedy, Doesn't matter. You can find it. Gametime makes scoring last-minute tickets easier than ever. Prices actually drop as the event gets closer, and with their all-in pricing, you can see the total cost up front, no surprises at checkout. They have the best features in the industry, from a panoramic view of your seat, no surprise fees. Like I said, the lowest price guarantee. You can book with total confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Michelle, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We had our spirited Ashton Jeanty conversation. Can't wait to see where he actually ends up going. It might even be earlier. What if the Patriots or the Jags
Browns
took him super early? Right. It could get crazy. It would be a shock, but it wouldn't be an outright shock, in my opinion. But with that being said, something that would be shocking. Do you see these segues? Professional podcast hosting going on. Speaking of shocking, every single year in the NFL, there is a shock when a team goes from worst to first in their division. And this year, my team that I think can make that move is the Chicago Bears. Listen, every team, you're talking about a team that was last in their division, ending up in first. It sounds insane, no matter who you're talking about, and you go through the divisions. What if I tell you the Raiders? Or what if I were to tell you the Giants? There's only 8. They all sound insane. But the Bears, to me, is the least insane team of them all, because you add Ben Johnson, who, if he's as good as people think, they're going to be able to cook. And with the weapons that we've talked about, if they do add an Ashton Jeanty, they had talent on defense. Really more than anything, I think the Bears had talent last year, and they didn't get the right coaching, and now you get Ben Johnson. And my guy Lauren Cox from Locked On Bears talked about how Ben Johnson showed up, talked to the team, and established a new mindset.
Can we actually win this time? Hype doesn't matter unless we're winning games. And I'll get excited in October and November, right? I'm not going to get too overhyped or excited until we actually start winning some football games, but everything else so far is all nice to hear. And there's definitely a difference there from Ben Johnson being not just, hey, we want to win, but we want to dominate, right? We're not going to win we don't just want to win by 1 point. We want to win by 21 points. We want to impose our will and show our opponents not just that we're better than them, but that we are significantly better than them, how much better we are, so that there is no doubt about, coulda, shoulda, woulda, won the game, gone differently. No, this is clearly the better football team beat the lesser football team.
And look, everybody wants to dominate. You know what I mean? That's obviously a thing. But again, if Ben Johnson is as good as we think he is, it could be a Cliff Kingsbury-like effect on Caleb Williams, and he could basically be a whole new player this year. They're in a position to take a luxury pick in the draft, I think, because they have so many answers on their roster. I just think the Bears are the most logical team when you look at and say, hey, they can flip it and go from worst to first.
I absolutely am with you. That's the team I had. I had another team I'll bring
Great.
up in a second. But with Ben Johnson, second year, Caleb Williams, and Rome Odunze, they fix up the interior offensive line. They have a solid enough defense. If they could grab Ashton Jeanty at number 10, my goodness, that would be a hard offense to stop. And last year, even with the other coaching staff that, not the best, they lost 7 games last year by 6 or fewer points. 4 games by 3 or fewer points. Yeah. So it's they were in it. It's just kept falling apart at the end. And I do think a lot of that is coaching, right? And a lot of that is Caleb Williams having to learn there in his second year and develop. But I am totally with you there. I like the Chicago Bears to take that step forward. Do you want to hear my other team?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. It's the Carolina Panthers, because in that division, there is no powerhouse, right? The Bears, it's going to be a lot of competition there with the Lions and Packers and Vikings. But the Panthers competition is the Bucks, probably the hardest one, the Saints and the Falcons. I do think that division is still for grabs. You got Dave Canales in his second season as a head coach. You got Bryce Young coming into his third season, but second year under Canales. And I do think after Young got benched, he came back and he looked much, much better. And towards the end of the year, the Panthers were actually looking like a confident team. They have to fix up their defense because it was so bad, but they did make additions in free agency. They're going to have to hit on some picks in the draft. on defense. But I can see the Panthers making that jump.
No, I like it. And again, the Panthers, it sounds insane, but there's going to be teams that make this kind of leap. It happens every year. And you can see at the end of the year how they kind of got it together. And I get the argument I'm looking at. Hey, I just think the Bears are good. Like, I know the division is good, although I think some teams may take a step back, and we'll talk about that maybe in just a second. But like with the NFC South, you're right. There's no dominant team. There's, 10 wins, won it last year. There's no like logical way to say that it's impossible for the Panthers to make that kind of leap if Bryce Young does take that next step. I will say I am a bit surprised that you didn't go with the San Francisco 49ers, a team that obviously you have some love for, and they look like a team, even though they finished 6-11 and got last place in the NFC West. Kyle Shanahan's a good coach. If things break right, if they stay healthy, if they draft well, like they're just a couple of moves away from getting back, and they'll probably regress to the mean in a way to win a couple of more games this year, no matter what. Anyways, just over last year, they'll probably just have better health and circumstances. So I think that one, it was an option that I'm surprised didn't get brought up. I do want to put you on the spot here. That leaves the AFC. We didn't pick a single team in the AFC. And look, it's a murderer's row here. It's the Raiders, the Titans, the Browns, the Patriots. It seems inconceivable, but Michelle, if you had to pick one of the AFC boneheads to go from worst to first, or let's just say worst to wild card, I'll make it easy on you. Worst to wild card. That sounds like a good segment up and coming on Locked On NFL. But pick one of those teams that you think could do it.
Well, we know it's not going to be the Raiders because the Chiefs are just not going to fall off. That's just never going to happen. It's not going to be Cleveland. They don't have a quarterback. And it's not going to be the Patriots beating up the Bills. So I'm going to go with the Titans. It's going to be the Titans. And
Cam Ward.
Yes, exactly. That division is very winnable if Cam Ward comes in and number 1 overall and he puts up CJ Stroud production from a couple years ago, or
right.
Jaden Daniels, obviously a lot of it, some of it was running, but like his arm production that he was able to bring the Commanders to the NFC Championship, like that could be the real difference maker there. And the Texans, I don't expect to be great next year. The Colts aren't going to be good. The Jaguars, you just never know what you're going to get out of Trevor Lawrence. So yeah, I would go with the Titans.
Listen, I'm glad you said it before me, because if you asked anybody that question and you look at it, you could think of some different answers. Of course, you'll get different answers. But like the Titans are, if you had to bet gun to your head, like that's the one that it's like, okay, well, the AFC South sucks and Cam Ward could be awesome. And the offense is going to be so different from the play action, heavy Will Levis stuff that they did to try to make. It's going to be what Brian Callahan wants to do, shotgun, spread, quick screens, RPO. They're going to mix in with Cam Ward because he's so good at it. Like, it's going to be so different from what people saw on tape last year with Levis that, and if like L'Jarius Sneed isn't out the whole season with an injury and plays okay and different things like that, the improved offensive line, it's not likely, folks. I know it sounds like some home cooking for me, but look at the AFC chumps. Like if one of them rises up, it might be the team that gets a flashy new quarterback. So it makes sense there. But we're talking about teams going from worst to first. There's always teams then that drop from first and head to the worst. And folks, I picked the Bears to start, which means I'm staying in the NFC North for my other pick. All right, Michelle, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about Ashton Jeanty. We talked about teams that could go from worst to first. Really fun discussion there. And those kind of discussions we'll be having all off season long here as we get through the summer months, just looking at what could happen in the 2025-2026 NFL season. But again, the opposite side of that coin is teams that could go from first to worst. And Michelle, again, I'm staying in the NFC North here. Before I tell you the team, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Draft. It's the perfect time. We heard from my guys, Keith Sanchez and Damian Parson, earlier in the show. You got to get up to date. It's 2 weeks. The draft's in 2 weeks, folks. It's perfect time. Get on it while you can. But I'm going with the Detroit Lions. I'm going with the Lions. And I have my reasons. They lose Ben Johnson. All right. Will the team improve? Aiden Hutchinson coming back off injury. Is he going to be the same? I think they really need him. And really all it comes down to for me is they won 15 games last year, just natural regression. They're going to lose a couple more. And then the Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, they lost both their coordinators, replacing them. We saw the Eagles take a major step back a couple of years ago when they had to do that, even with all the talent that they had. I think this is a clear spot. If Dan Campbell isn't the coach that people thinks he is because of the coordinators that he had, we're going to see it in year one, and then he may adjust to figure that out on his own. But the Lions are my pick.
I also had the Lions. It's kind of crazy we chose the same ones. I have another team as well. I'll throw in there.
Okay.
But yeah, the Lions, I mean, last year they were fantastic, but it was an easier schedule. And almost all the games they played were in a dome. It was really wild. A lot of indoor games or a lot of nice weather games. And this year, that's just not going to be the same case. They have a lot of hard away games outdoors in Baltimore, in Chicago, in Cincinnati, in Green Bay, in Kansas City. And then in Philadelphia and in Washington, D.C. Like a lot of hard games. You got the Vikings in a dome. Cool. But that's a hard defense too. And then the Rams will be your one nice weather game outdoors. But
yeah,
a lot of hard away games. We know Jared Goff's not the same in the cold as he is in a dome.
In the elements. Yep.
Lost Ben Johnson, like you said, and Aaron Glenn. Losing both coordinators is not going to be good. And you have 3 really good teams in your division. Now, I mean, we're expecting the Bears to be really good, right? So yeah. I could see this whole division having at least 9 wins, but that still could put the Lions at the bottom.
You're 100% right. And that's why I think their over-under win total on FanDuel right now is 10.5 games. And my guy Matt Derry from Locked On Lions, he saw that as well.
The Lions over-under win total is 10.5. A year ago, it was at, I believe, 11.5. Lions won 15 games last year. 15. All right. Nobody expects, especially with this kind of schedule, and the road schedule is going to be brutal next season. Nobody expects. I mean, the Lions have to play the AFC North next year. They got to see Baltimore and Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, Cleveland. Whatever. But you know what I mean? It's going to be a difficult season next year from a scheduling perspective for the Lions. And they're also playing really, really good teams. I mean, I expect the Lions to be playing in Philadelphia in week 1. I do. The Lions over-under for wins is 10.5 wins, which would mean Vegas and FanDuel and everybody believes that the Lions will win 4.5 less games than they won this season. If the projection's 10.5, the team won 15 this past year, you do the math.
Well, I got to tell you, I did the math, and I think they're going to win 10 games or less because the Bears are going to be better. The Packers are a solid team. The Vikings are still a solid team. And I just think the Lions take a little bit of a step back naturally because they won 15 games, and the Lions take a little bit of a step back because they lost both their coordinators, and that results in probably 10 or 9 wins. I think they'll probably still make the playoffs, but I do think they take a noticeable step back. And I think by the end of the year, we start to hear can you win a Super Bowl with Jared Goff? All that Goff finally found a home. No, deal with a little adversity and see how you feel about Jared Goff.
Yeah, this is going to be a hard year for them. I mean, you have to hit on both your coordinators taking over, which is not an easy thing to do. And like they keep bringing up the schedule. Like I will not be shocked at all if they're 10-7 or maybe even worse than that. And maybe that's bad enough to go from first to worse, right? Or maybe first to third or something like that.
Yep, certainly possible. You said you had one other team that you were thinking of, even though we agreed on this one.
Yeah, so I'm going with the Texans. I could see it happening from them going worse to first. Started 5-1 last year, finished the season 5-6. Like that, the last 11 games they went 5-6. The offensive line is still in shambles. They trade away Larry Tunsil too. Joe Mixon's getting older, and he kind of fell off at the end of last year. Not many weapons for CJ Stroud with Stephon Diggs leaving and Tank Dell probably going to miss this entire season. It's Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz, and I guess they traded for Christian Kirk. We'll see how that goes. But they were like towards the end of the year, they really, really fell off. So I can see, I do really still like their defense, their young defense. I think they have good pieces. But if Cam Ward hits, right, and if Trevor Lawrence can finally do his thing, the real issue here is like the Colts, like you really with Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson. It's hard not to see them being last, but if I had to choose a team in the AFC, that would be the team.
Yeah, that makes sense. Listen, I know this isn't the conversation, and Jacksonville didn't finish last, but I think right now I'll probably have Jacksonville winning the division. I don't know why. I just
Yeah,
feel like
I like that.
something clicks a little bit there, and the division's not that good. They could win it at 9-8 again. I just have a feeling. But with that being said, I don't know that I have another good answer. You know, you look around Tampa Bay, you know, same thing as the Carolina Panthers conversation, like Tampa Bay 10-7. They won a bunch of close games. Baker Mayfield was incredible last year. They lose Liam Cohen. If the coordination takes a step back, Baker Mayfield regresses a little bit back to he's been closer to who he's been most of his career. I could see them taking a step back there. It's like the inverse of all the conversations that we've had. If I could see one team that I think is a little more stunning, it would be the Baltimore Ravens. It's not likely, obviously. We're picking from a bunch of very unlikely things. Seeing a team go from worst to first is more likely than seeing some of the best teams in the NFL all of a sudden be terrible. But we know the Bengals are capable of being way better than 9-8. The Steelers, Aaron Rodgers gets in there and plays better than Russell Wilson with DK Metcalf and George Pickens, a little better on the offensive line now that they have both their young tackles and they've got some experience. The Steelers could win a couple of games. Like the Ravens could go 8-9 or 9-8, and it'd just be like the NFC North last year where everybody's really good, you know? So something like that could, I guess, happen. But other than that, yeah, I'm with you on our guesses. I think those are the most likely.
Yeah, I'm with you too. And really the only, if Lamar Jackson's healthy, they're not finishing last, especially like with the Browns in the division. No.
Hey, you know, you never know. Kirk Cousins coming in there, getting some revenge. You're right. It's super unlikely, but yeah, Lamar doesn't even have to get injured. He might just be sick too often and miss games. You never know.
He does have lots of belly issues.
Listen, something that we empathize with here on the Locked On NFL podcast. Yeah, right. And I can speak for my guy, the barber, Tony Wiggins, and he can relate. But with that being said, check out Tony's episode of the Locked On NFL podcast here in the afternoon. Definitely do appreciate all you guys tuning in to today's edition of Locked On NFL. I am your host, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, the Data Queen, Michelle Maju. Thanks so much for tuning in. Stay safe out there.
Bye, y'all.